look at the debate between left and right for a minute. The right resists helping the poor in any way other than help the rich invest more to create more jobs. They resist helping the poor because to take from Peter, you're taking from Peter and giving to Paul, right? That's a full capacity assumption. If we are at full capacity, and the only way of helping Peter is taking from Paul, there is one set of moral issues that come into play. But if we have unused capacity, then it's theoretically possible to enrich Peter without taking from Paul. The entire dynamics change. So your question becomes, why do we have unused capacity? Now, you don't normally ask that question, do you? I mean, it's not the kind of, but why do we have unused capacity? And I think it goes back to that basic assumption, which I think is wrong, that capital makes labor more productive. There's something wrong with that assumption. There's something wrong with understanding how we got from 1776. I mean, it's easy to understand the economy of 1776. Let's think of a movie about the Revolution, American Revolution. You want to know what we did about 1860? Think of the Civil War. I mean, it's all there. We have movies. You want to know what it was like in the Depression, you know?
Well, yeah, people my age, we were all saying, oh, this generation doesn't know how it is because we got by, and I guess we're bragging about it, how we managed.
Yeah,
and
we suffered.
And it was simple, but everybody was in the boat, except maybe the doctors in town. Or, but it seemed like it was a closer time. Or when my grandfather's bakery burned, how did he get the loan to rebuild? I never found out myself, but it must have been the community of the first immigrants would provide, or it's the secret. They used to say that about Henry Kaiser when he started out. He was good at getting loans. Yeah. He was up the valley there too. And so that's how the banking, how do you think? The ability to get a loan, the ability to get the capital. Well, like the man in Bangladesh, who won the, I heard him speak on the Commonwealth Club program.
Mohammed Yunus, yes. That's what they call microcredit. You're right, credit is a big factor. That's one of the things.
So sadly,
so unused capacity, that's a problem?
That's a big problem. Yeah. I mean, as to say, well, it's an opportunity.
Let's go back to my construction company. Do I have unused capacity because I bought too many saws and I don't use them every day and they just sit
I would say you have unused capacity because there are, in California, millions of people who would like to hire you to build a home for them that they would like to live in, but they can't afford you.
Okay.
That's your unused capacity. And you could triple your size and buy many more instruments from people who are just waiting to build them if they only had demand.
Right.
Who could get their stuff from suppliers who are just waiting for the order from the. I mean, there's a whole rippling of unused capacity.
So, and you're also saying that you describe the right's resistance, but the left's resistance to distribute money isn't really going to give what you just told George.
That's right. The idea, that's right. But we've got a lot of strings in the air right now. I just said, all I did so far was to touch the left wing and the right wing issue. But neither one at this point spends a lot of time talking about unused capacity. It's not one of theirs. Now, I want to give you now a different way of looking at the Industrial Revolution. Instead of thinking of it like the power saw, hand saw issue, here's another way. You haul a sack a mile and you're exhausted. You put 10 sacks on a horse and go twice as far in half the time. We agree that the horse is capital. It's a thing, it can be owned. You put it on the left, right? It's capital, right? The horse has done something very important beyond making you more productive, hasn't it? What has the horse done? The horse has done work. Yeah. The horse has done its own work. More than make you more productive. And so then you turn on an ignition key in the truck, and you've got 10,000 sacks, and you do 50,000 sack miles worth of work.
Mm-hmm.
You got the energy to go to a dance instead of being exhausted. And now, who or what has done the extra work?
The truck,
Yeah.
the invention.
So if you were to examine the productive input of labor and capital from 1776, when we were driving covered wagons, to today, has it got much to do with labor productivity at all?
Inventions.
Well, that's labor, but that's over. But it's got something to do with it. That's the source. But once the invention is done, what's the difference?
It's who owns it, huh?
It's the capital that's doing the extra work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the distributional consequences are the ownership claims on the work done by the capital. So, in a sense, Adam Smith was wrong. The most important role of capital is not to increase labor productivity. The most important role of capital is to do ever more of the work. Now, I maintain that recognition is like the vase between the faces. And the other example I often give is every morning, you go this way, you look this way, and you see the sunrise, and every evening, and the golden ray, it's the sunset. Complete illusion, right? We agree? Complete illusion. The earth is spinning. Complete illusion.
Yeah.
The idea that capital makes labor more productive is a complete illusion. Now, so that's the beginning. Now, once you recognize that capital does its own work, which conventional economics obscures by saying the role of capital is to make labor more productive. Once you accept that proposition, then you come to the recognition that capital has a number. We actually number them in 6 powers that you'll never conceive of fully unless you see as capital as being an independent producer. First of all, capital replaces labor, right? So the horse hauls, so replacement of capital. We hear lots of capital substitution for labor, and you're going to hire another worker, you're going to build a machine, pay for a machine and hire fewer workers. Do it all the time. But it's actually,
we did it here, actually. I'll give you an example. This construction of this house, we had to build a drainage ditch around the house because the basement was getting flooded every winter, and we had to haul up 10,000 pounds of gravel to go on this company. It had a big conveyor belt and a semi-truck, and these diesel powered, and it was going to take that big pile of rock and put it around the house, and it cost $10,000. And my other option was to go down to the lumber yard where all the Hispanic people, Mexican people, and they hang out all day, and I hired 10 of them for $10 an hour for all day, so that was, $100 a person, or $80 a person for 8-hour day times 10, so it's $800 or $10,000. That was an easy thing to stick with the hand labor.
Right.
And I felt better emotionally because those people were going to feed a family with it, whereas I don't know where the money for my $10,000 is going to go to somebody who invented a patent or had some. Anyway, that's my.
To be sure, and there are
comparison.
But I would offer to you that if you examine the way we produce things today, in most instances, we use more capital and less labor. I mean, you have a knack, which is to be respected for bringing the exceptions to the rules.
It's just being cheap. I mean, it's human nature.
But that's the
no,
nature.
it's not about
that's
cheap.
Exactly right.
That's okay.
No, it's not cheap. It's being
okay. Efficient, I guess, with the money, with the capital I had to work with.
You're optimizing output. Yeah. But capital also I mean, it's rare that capital simply does the work that labor once did. It almost always does far more work.
Yeah.
Far more capacity. My guess is that the problem with that machine, that conveyor belt, is your job is too small.
Exactly.
That is to say, if the issue were to hire 10,000 people,
absolutely,
or some,
you're right.
So,
you're right.
But at any rate, capital not only replaces labor, it vastly supplements labor. Third thing capital does is capital does work that labor can never do. For example, a farmer never grew an apple. All a farmer can do is help a tree grow an apple. We can marvel at the computer revolution, but we can't make a single computer chip because our hands are too big. So we can't fly. We can't lift the way elevators can lift. I mean, we can't be a train. We can't be, we can't be a submarine. There are all sorts of things we cannot do, but we can help capital. So the idea that technology and capital creates jobs for labor, actually, technology creates probably more jobs for capital than labor. And so although technology may make labor more productive, technology always makes capital much more productive than labor. Of course, the fourth thing capital can do is work without labor. Like, I always tell people, try living without your washing machine if you don't think capital does work. And there's so many things that capital just does, automatic things of all sorts. The fifth thing capital can do is to buy itself on the promise of its future income. You invest in things only if they pay for themselves. And the sixth thing capital can do is, theoretically, capital, just as it does more work, it is the capacity to distribute much more income than labor. So, you put those things together, and now I'm going to give you an economic proposition that is not controversial, and then an implication that seems to baffle economists. The principle that's not baffling is that the economics of investing in a capital instrument today depends upon the anticipation of demand for its product tomorrow. You always have to build first, and then get capital working with labor to satisfy the purchasing power in the future. So the promise of future demand, future buying power, stimulates both the employment of capacity and the investment of more capacity in the present. Let's think of a timeline. It's on a very simple level. You're a construction person, so I might say, you might say to somebody, I will build your house if you pay me, or I will mow your lawn if you have, so just the promise of the future, you see. So the binary proposition is that the promise of broader distribution of ownership in the future, that is to say, the promise of the ownership of growing productive capacity in the future, will cause the more fuller employment of productive capacity in the present, the employment of previously unused capacity, and the investment of more capacity in the present. Future broader ownership promotes the investment in unused capacity and the promotion of more investment in the present. The truth is, we always have unused capacity. Some of it's good. If you had sudden demand now to build 2 houses rather than 1, you'd like to be able to, every company has a certain amount of unused capacity. Because to lose market share to another producer who's ready to take away your customer is no good business. So we always have some. So we're always employing our existing capacity up to some margin, and when the margin gets too small, you invest in more. And that's the nature of business. So the solution to profitably employing unused capacity, and the solution to the question of how will people earn so they can afford to live without being wards of the state, it's not through labor. It's not through labor. The purpose of technology is to squeeze labor out of production. The capital that today buys itself for the rich, primarily. Almost all capital is acquired with the earnings of capital.
Future capital.
Huh?
Future capital.
Yeah, well, of the earnings of capital. But even now, even today, almost all capital is acquired with the earnings of capital.
Right.
And so
the rich don't work.
They have. Think of a horse hauling sacks for a profit that buys capital, and you hauling sacks to buy capital. You cannot compete with the horse for the work necessary to acquire capital.
Right.
Capital is the idea that capital is independently productive and far more productive than labor is that changes the fundamental core of what people believe.
And every day you can compete less.
That's right.
Because the capital becomes more powerful and that much more inaccessible.
That's right. That's right. But the potential to spread its benefits increases too. I mean, the greater technology.
Once people wake up and understand this.
That's all they have to get the Homestead Acts, which were designed to enable people to own land. Mm-hmm. And you conceive of the FHA, which was designed people to acquire a home without a down payment on credit, with credit insurance. So instead of the down payment being sort of like the insurance premium to the lender, you've insurance. You can think of, and also a government monetary policy, which is called the real bills doctrine. You'd have to take a little bit of explaining. But basically, let me say, looking at those institutions, the rich acquire capital today. One of the preferred ways to acquire capital is using corporations, because they have limited liability, trusts, they have investors, advisors that do the details, lenders, they love insurance, they insure their risk, government reinsurance. It's nice to be part of a capital acquisition plan that's so big that it's too big to fail. Like, we just recently bailed out major companies, and central bank. Keeping track of the money supply to make sure that your capital is protected. Those 6 institutions work for the rich today, and they could work for the poor, and they would allow us to employ our capacity more fully. Now, of course, if you were the 1% that owned 50%, and you're earning 10 or 15 or 20 times your consumption needs, would you want growth?
Probably not.
Why have this capital nugget grow so big that other people will be able to maybe demand more pay for, rather than being driven to their knees? So it's an idea that once you accept it has sort of what you might call geopolitical implications. Mm-hmm. Now the big question is not a question that you can come. You have to come to it at your own notion, is this growth element that Adam Smith didn't see, that Karl Marx didn't see, that brought us socialism, that John Maynard Keynes didn't see, that's the ideology of the Democratic Party, that nobody involved in either mainstream or what they call heterodox economics, this principle that the more broadly capital is acquired, the more will soak up unused capacity profitably and employ growth. You have to decide whether that's a little issue or a huge issue. That's what everybody has. Because if it's a little issue, it's true, but it's small. Right. Then so what? Why change what we do? But if it's true and big, and the way I tell my students is that I think that the question of how big it is directly related to the question of how much unused capacity do we have. Those two things are the same. Mm-hmm. Because I think the elegant explanation for why we have unused capacity, the most elegant explanation, the simplest, is because we have concentrated ownership. We have this capital base that can produce vast amounts with less and less labor, but that earns itself and distributes income to people who will not spend it on consumption. And that by broadening that distribution, by broadening ownership, so you have to decide how big it is. But that's what makes this issue relevant to the people who have now still alive, but we can no longer say because we didn't succeed in this 20 minutes of getting it to the people who really need to do something. If it's big, then there are a lot of those people that in the last 20 minutes we could have saved if we could only have gotten to Ted Turner. But if they're small, if it's a small thing, then it's not a big deal. We can go about our way. But that's a sense of it. And my sense is the way that is this new? And my guess is this is something you haven't heard before. In the category of things, there's probably nobody who's given you this line.
No.
You won't find it on the talk shows. You won't find it on when people say how can we deal with the economy? What about poor working people? All the issues, the ecology. I mean, you name it. The idea of broadening ownership is never even not even on the map. Not even on the map.
And why is that?
Well, that's the question.
Is it the same as your music? I mean, these are puzzling things.
Yeah, I think there must be a commonality. My guess is that the binary economics has bigger baggage.
Yeah, because you've got the capitalist manifesto, and there's a stigma about the communist manifesto.
Well, it's just that we have a vested interest in those people who like the fact that capital acquisition is limited to existing owners.
Now,
And
why
you have
is
another
that?
group of people.
Why do they like that? The lady in the Berkeley Hills that said there's be too many people building houses in the Berkeley Hills, instead of thinking they'll find the creativity to go somewhere else. He was talking about explaining this to a Berkeley person about more people being wealthy, and her comment was, too many people in the Berkeley Hills.
Yeah, that kind of notion. But
that's ignorance, I think. That's when you need the Buckminster Fullers and the
I
designers.
think it's a low level of spirituality and compassion and all sorts of things. I mean, I think there's a lot to that. I do know that there's a story that a law teacher friend of mine, economist, tells about the guy, professor, who every year got his raise, and he would get his 5% raise. You know what 5% is happy. And one year he happened to get his 5% raise, and after he opened it, and he had a reason to go into a colleague's office, and the colleague was on the phone, so he just sat there waiting for him to get off the phone. He said, and he happened to see there, and there was his raise letter, and he could read upside down 10%. He was miserable after that.
Oh.
So
how much?
So relative wealth. Relative wealth is important.
Well, you were saying once that there's about 10% of people that you know are really compassionate. They're really trying to help somebody else.
Yeah.
And then and I was speculating with him, what about the other end of the spectrum where people actually enjoy being rich because somebody's poor? And I think they're rare. Those types are rare too.
No, I don't think so. I think at least 10%.
At least 10%, but that gives us 80% in between.
There's a wonderful, I don't know if you've seen it, you can get it from Bill Moyers, you can buy it from him. He has a video of Louis Kelso. Copyright. I have a copy of it.
Oh, I'd like to see that.
And Moyers interviewed him right before he died.
Oh.
It's a good program. Kelso was very, very articulate. But at any rate...
so Moyers must have asked him about inherent human nature that's greedy and selfish.
Toward the end of it, he said something like this. He said, aren't you fighting against the basic nature of capitalism? He said, this is a jungle out there, and the capitalist is a tiger. And he's just going to get it the way he wants it. Aren't you just fighting against the nature of capitalism? He says, and Kelso says, no, I don't think so. I don't think we've brought out the true nature of capitalism. He said, everybody's got an ego. Everybody needs a way to live, earn a living. He said, and he's not the rich tiger is not the only tiger in the tiger jungle. He said, and I think the hungry tiger is going to beat the greedy tiger every time, especially when he outnumbers him 95-5. All he's got to do is get the issues straight, so he knows what he's fighting for. That's Louis Kelso.
What do you think of that, George?
Is Louis Kelso the
original
father of Democrats or something?
Yeah, no, this is the author of this idea.
What was he like?
Oh, he was wonderful. He was brilliant. He was a genius.
The first time you met him was?
Yeah, I met him. First time I met him, there was a sense of beatitude about him. He just
first time.
He just
That's wonderful.
a presence around him.
That's really very good.
He knew that he had discovered an idea that was hugely important, and he also knew that he couldn't seem to get it across. But he had no doubt that eventually the world would come to see this idea. I had the same feeling. I think eventually People are going to have to come to grips with the fact that capital is doing most of the work, and that you can't support a market economy without broad ownership. It's just that simple.
Well, see, he had a good reason to say it.
It's all around us.
Giving people hope and
Right.
a vision. As they say, people will die without a vision, but or you've just never been through things to see your own child starving. Or,
It's too bad we have to do that. Have a war, have
well,
suffering,
now
have
we're
child
more aware
starve.
of those things.
How?
Used to be in the distance. My grandmother had an old song about Napoleon, how mad they were when he occupied Germany, and you know they still sing it.
But how are we today learning about Africa and knowing how many people are dying this second
people,
right now? And
they
what
can't
does it
bear
matter?
to look at it anymore.
And what does it matter?
Well, it doesn't matter unless you can do something about it.
This is where we get into
But
moral
that's
issues.
but that's the issue.
Well, that's the human spirit. If I want to help, and if I can't, what? I'm not gonna.
You'll help to a certain extent, not to hurt yourself. And if you're worried about your health care here, you're not going to send money to Africa. We're going to try and spend more on our national health care and pay more taxes because we're so afraid of getting cancer or ending up in a hospital with a $100,000 bill for taking a hangnail off or something. Because that's where we are. It's really changed in the last, since you mentioned Henry Kaiser started the foundation for his workers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably the best one going on.
We also need to
the government's
consider-
studying that one right now.
We also need to consider hangnail therapy. You know, does it really need to cost that much? I think, and I think if more people are wealthy, they'll stumble across more efficiency. I don't think we have to assume they're going to screw up if they're more rich.
Yeah, maybe it'll change because the rich people have to pay for their hangnails for $100,000, and they're going to start screaming at health care because there's enough people, like you say, in the 95 to 5. Now all of a sudden, who is being, affected by health care? It's not just the poor people. In contrary, the poor people have free health care. It's the middle class that don't. They're the ones that are paying $1,000 a month for health care for a family where my mother, used to pay $20 a month. It cost $1 for me to be born. Today it would cost probably $100,000.
It's still be worth it.
So,
there's such moral questions.
but getting back to,
I mean,